Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode, we shall be covering the 10th edition faction focus released by Games Workshop for the Emperor's True Finest, like I did for the Tyranid faction focus. And if you've not seen that video, I'll make sure to link it at the end of this one. We are going to be getting into the nitty-gritty detail, covering all of the information that we have available for the Astra Militarum. This will include reviewing the army rules, detachment rules, data sheets, stratagems, and weapon profiles. And at every single stage, we're going to be giving the various sections a score out of 10 with a final score of 40. This allows us to compare the Guard to the other faction focuses that I'll be doing and seeing how each faction stacks up against each other in the bigger picture. And so, without further ado, I know we're all really excited for this video. Let's take a look at our knives, our sharp sticks, and our electronic ball breakers, and get right into today's episode. So let's begin with the army rule. Now, if you're new to 10th edition or 40k, maybe you've not been catching up with how everything works, the army rule is essentially the bonus that you get for collecting a specific faction. Each faction gets its own unique army rule. So for the Tyranids, they benefit from Synapse and the Shadow in the Warp, and Space Marines get Oath of Moment. Army rules are pretty important because not only do they give you some pretty good bonuses, but they're also really important for communicating the vibe of the faction to the controlling player. Like, Synapse does a really good job of showing that the Tyranids are part of a hive mind, not just in the lore, but also on the tabletop. And Oath of Moment really displays that single-minded focus and aggression of the Adeptus Astartes. And for the Imperial Guard, we get the Voice of Command. This army rule is designed to emulate the chain of command that you find in a lot of humanities militaries, where you have lower ranks taking orders from their sergeants and officers. On the tabletop, what this allows you to do is have your officers give out specific bonuses to the men around them, turning them from a mass of uncoordinated conscripts into some cold-eyed, disciplined killers. Now, at its core, Voice of Command is the same as it was in previous editions. As I said, officers hand out buffs to men. But the way it works in 10th edition is noticeably different, and there are a number of key changes you're going to want to be aware of. We'll start off by going through the rule itself, and then we'll move on to the different orders that you can issue. So, Voice of Command. If your army faction is Astra Militarum, in your command phase, officer models from your army with this ability can issue orders. Each officer's datasheet will specify how many orders it can issue and which units are eligible to receive those orders. Each time an officer model issues an order, select one of the orders below, then select one eligible friendly unit within 6 inches of the officer model to issue it to. Until the start of your next command phase, the unit you selected is affected by the order. Unless otherwise stated, a unit can only be affected by one order at a time. Any order subsequently issued to that unit replaces the current one. If a unit being affected by an order becomes battle shocked, that order ceases to affect that unit. Now, I appreciate that Games Workshop often over-wordies their rules, so let me break that down into a really simple explanation. Your officer gives out a buff to a nearby unit. There's a list of what buffs he can give out. If your unit suffers from battle shock and breaks, then they no longer get to benefit from orders. They're too scared to do as they're told. That's it. Simple. Now, I mentioned that there were a few differences between this Voice of Command and the 9th edition version. And whether you're a new player or an experienced one, you're definitely going to want to be aware of them because they are actually quite impactful. The first thing is these orders are now active not only in your turn as the Guard Commander, but also in your opponents. They last from the beginning of one command phase all the way through your turn, all the way through your opponent's turn, and back round to then your next command phase. Now, this has been done so that certain orders actually work. For example, there's no point in giving your squad take cover to improve their save characteristic in your turn when you're probably not going to be receiving any friendly fire unless there's a particularly trigger-happy Commissar or inexperienced Death Strike commander nearby. But this also affects some of your aggressive orders and not just your defensive ones. For example, fixed bayonets. In previous editions, you would issue this in your command phase, it would last your turn, and then once you had driven that particularly scary unit of Tal Fire Warriors off the objective in glorious close combat, the bayonets would go away again. This meant that when your opponent inevitably countercharged you in his turn, you were back hitting on your basic weapon skill. But in 10th edition, those bayonets stay out until they're ordered to go away, and this can cause your opponent a bit of a headache. If he tries to countercharge you, he has to make sure it's with a unit that he's confident is going to breeze through those 10 guardsmen, because if he messes his dice up, the guardsmen have got a good chance of hurting him in his own turn. But the really big change is your opponent now has the ability to counter your orders by forcing your guys to take battle shock tests. It's all well and good your officer bellowing at his men to take aim at the termagants, but if your guys are just too far gone from facing the cosmic horror, they may not do as they're told. This could result in you missing out on some pretty clutch buffs, and at the wrong moment, a squad may fail the order that you need, and it could cost you the game. Fortunately, I don't think that the tabletop situation is going to be quite as dramatic. When you think about it, you're more likely going to put your orders on those fresh units that are at full strength, at full efficiency with maximum damage output, than you are going to put them on a shattered squad of infantry. Of course, there are certain factions like the Tyranids that do seem to be able to force you to take battle shock tests using things like Shadow in the Warp or the Screamer Killer's Death Scream, but by and large, I think the Guard are going to have ways of making sure that their orders are obeyed. I mean, I'm going to be 99% certain that Commissars are going to have an ability to blow a guy's brains out and either re-roll the battle shock test or maybe even auto-pass it. Either way, however you slice it, I'm actually a big fan of this change. I know some people will be surprised by that. It is definitely a nerf. Things not happening could cause you problems. But a good rule should always have interaction from both players, and your opponent should be rewarded for going after your chain of command and trying to break as many of your units as possible. But we've said so much about these orders, and we've not even looked at the buffs you can hand out yet. So let's dive into those right now. Starting off, we've got move, move, move. Add 3 inches to the move characteristic of models in this unit. Movement buffs are always very welcome. I often say that games of 40k are won and lost in the movement phase. What I really like about this order is its flexibility, and I see 3 or 4 main uses for it. Straight up, getting a bit of extra movement might get you onto an objective, it might allow you to get some weapons into range, and you still get to fire at your full capacity after using those 3 extra inches. But if you really need to go the extra distance, perhaps sprint from one piece of cover to the next, or start moving blocking an opponent, you can go 6 inches, then you add the 3, which gets you up to 9, and then you still get to advance. And if you roll a big 6 on your advance, then your squad has actually gone 15 inches in one turn. That is actually a noticeable improvement over the maximum move distance of 12 inches using Move and Move in the last codex. That's all from an infantry perspective, but it's also really good from a tanker's point of view as well. You could use this to get a Lehman Russ just round the corner, just to get that extra little bit of line of sight so it can start hitting the enemy with its big guns. Or you might be able to order a Chimera to move, and remember, we can now disembark after moving. Next up, we've got fixed bayonets and take aim. These are essentially the same order, they just affect different weapons. With fixed bayonets, you get to improve your weapon skill by 1 with melee weapons, and with take aim, you get to improve your ballistic skill by 1 with ranged weapons. The end result is that it makes your guardsmen hit on 3s rather than 4s in the respective phases. Both of these orders have had a bit of an upgrade and a bit of a downgrade as well. They did lose the extra AP bonus. They used to give you +1 to hit and an additional -1 AP. That was nice, I'm not going to lie. But Games Workshop has categorically stated they want to reduce the amount of armor penetration in the game, so it's not unexpected that they took the AP away. And at the end of the day, if I had to pick between keeping the extra AP or keeping the bonus to hit, I'm going to pick that bonus to hit every single time. One of Guard's biggest weaknesses is having a basic ballistic skill of 4+. Anything we can do to improve that is vitally important. And I would rather have my Guardsmen hitting on 3s every single day of the week than having them have a little bit of extra AP. The big improvement though is that the orders now improve your actual ballistic skill or weapon skill stat. They don't just give you a +1 to hit modifier. This is a really important distinction, because if 10th edition retains the rule that you can never benefit from greater than +1 to hit or -1 to hit, essentially it doesn't matter if you stack on 7 to hit bonuses, you only ever get the benefit of +1 to hit, then having extra ballistic skill is really important, because you can have a +1 to hit modifier and you can then improve your ballistic skill characteristic as well. Therefore, if there's guard weapons out there and guard units out there which can receive take aim and also have the heavy rule where they get +1 to hit, you could see guardsman units running around firing las cannons, autocannons, other potential weapon systems, more likely things like their artillery with the bombast field cannons or heavy las cannons, and they're going to be hitting on 2s, which is very spicy. We then have another classic guard order: first rank fire, second rank fire. Improve the attack characteristics of rapid fire weapons equipped by models in this unit by 1. Essentially, any rapid fire weapons in the squad get an extra attack. To be clear, this isn't changing the rapid fire value, so you're not going from rapid fire 1 to rapid fire 2. No, you still keep that. What's actually being changed here is the attack characteristic of the weapon itself. So your lasgun will be rapid fire 1, and then instead of being attacks 1, it will be attacks 2. This is actually pretty good, because it means that at long range you'll get an extra shot, and also at close range you'll also get that extra shot. If the order just affected the rapid fire rule and changed to rapid fire 2, you would only get your 1 shot at 24-inch range, and you wouldn't be able to receive the bonus until you started getting up close and personal with the enemy. But what's really interesting about this is not only does it affect your lasguns, but it affects all other rapid fire weapons as well, which is huge. It's always just been a lasgun focused order, but now your plasma guns are also going to benefit from the extra shots. Triple tapping plasma at 12-inch range? That sounds very tasty. The next order is take cover, and this has had a big improvement in my opinion. It allows you to improve the save characteristic of models in this unit by 1, although you can never use it to improve the save beyond a 3+. 3+ is your hard limit. What I love about this is it's just improving the save characteristic. It's not giving you a cover save. It's not giving you the benefit of cover. Therefore, you can stack cover with take cover, giving a squad of regular guardsmen in a ruin a 3+ save. That is the same as a Space Marine against incoming small arms fire. In addition, it also no longer specifies that you have to use this order against ranged weapons. When it was a stratagem, you could only use it in the enemy shooting phase. When it was an order, it gave you cover, but you couldn't use cover in combat. Now that's all gone away. This now means you can have squads of Kazakin or Scions or other heavier infantry in your force with a 3+ save in close combat. Considering how prevalent cover saves are likely to be, with things like battlefield debris giving units cover even just shooting across some barrels, it looks like stacking these saves up is going to actually be pretty easy. Another defensive buff we've got here is duty and honor. This allows you to improve the leadership and objective control characteristic of models in this unit by 1. I think this order is subtly very powerful. The extra leadership is nice, and if you issue the order and then subsequently have to take a battle shock test, you're more likely to pass it, meaning your squad is more likely to retain the order of duty and honor. But I think the big one is the objective control. The fact that you can do this in your turn and it lasts into your opponent's turn. You could tell one of your infantry squads to duty and honor, run them onto an enemy objective, take that away from them, and therefore in their next command phase they could score less points. Whilst all the other orders focus on improving your unit's damage output or movement or defensiveness, Duty and Honor focuses on points, and we all know that denying your enemy victory points, improving your own, is a great way to win games of 40k. But that covers the army rule and all the different bonuses that we can hand out, and I have to say I really like it. Is it as straightforward and potentially as powerful as the ones we had in 9th edition? Well, no, it's not. We're now down to 6 orders with our index. I expect that'll get expanded out with the codex and different attachments where it unlock different orders, but we've definitely got a more limited roster. Some of them have taken slight downgrades in areas like reducing the AP. Move doesn't just give you that flat auto advance anymore, making it slightly less reliable, but Take Cover looks a lot more improved, and so does first rank fire, second rank fire. But the main thing is that orders are still here. They still do what they should be doing, which is improving your units. They're still a great way of having more tools in the toolbox, and whilst it might be a bit of a problem, I actually fully applaud Games Workshop adding in ways for your opponent to interact with your orders and trying to break the chain of command. Overall, taking into account fun and flavor for both players, but also power and competitiveness, I'm going to give Voice of Command a solid 7.5 out of 10. It's not perfect at all, but having that level of flexibility at the guard player's fingertips is really important. I've mentioned this before in other videos that I've done, but having that capability of making a square peg fit through a round hole is so good in 10th edition, and that's what Voice of Command brings to the table. Next up, we've got the detachment rule. Now, Games Workshop hasn't given us the exact wording of the text, but they have given us a pretty good indication. If you take a combined regiment detachment, it seems to be the one that's coming with our index, you will benefit from the Born Soldiers detachment rule. This confers lethal hits on ranged attacks made by units that remain stationary. If you're not up to date with the 10th edition lingo, lethal hits basically mean if you get a 6 to hit, it auto wounds. So Born Soldiers works very similarly to how it does now. However, it has taken a huge nerf. Forcing units to remain stationary to get the benefits of Born Soldiers is a huge problem. I mentioned it before, but games of 40k are often won and lost in the movement phase. And if you are encouraging players to stay still, one of two things is typically going to happen. They're going to make a mistake and feel like they have to stay still to get that army rules, at which point they miss out on some important movement and that costs them the game. Or they realize they need to be constantly on the move, and therefore they never benefit from the Born Soldiers rule outside of a cursory sense or the occasional situation. Now, of course, there are a number of factors that could influence and diminish the importance of movement in 10th edition. For example, the way that terrain works. If we find that there's going to be a lot less obscuring terrain, or if obscuring terrain isn't even in the game anymore, there seems to be a bit of debate about how Ruins works, then being able to remain stationary and shoot across the map could be very nice. But if we maintain even a similar level of terrain density from 9th into 10th, then I can confidently and sadly say that Born Soldiers will be not a particularly good ability. It will have gone from being S tier, frankly D tier. This is only further exacerbated by the implication that the enhancements that come with the combined regiment attachment seem to also have taken a bit of a beating. Enhancements are your relics and warlord traits. Drill Commander allows you to get your Born Soldiers off on 5s and 6s, but this is going to be a warlord trait. It's going to affect the warlord and the unit he's attached to, so you won't be able to now put what is essentially ingrained precision, the strategy from 9th edition, on any unit that you want. And again, you're going to have to stay still to benefit from it. It also seems like the death mask of Alonius Pius is fundamentally changing, no longer handing out any sort of invulnerable save, but instead meaning that your objective control always goes as at least 1 rather than 0 if you fail a battle shock test. That seems nice, but we're in the Guards and we tend to have plenty of units available, and I don't see why you wouldn't just stick an extra squad on objective, making sure that you held it rather than messing around with things like the Death Mask of Melonius. I'm still maintaining a small glimmer of hope. We haven't seen the official rules for that kind of detachment yet, and we also don't know if there's going to be a number of ways to count as remaining stationary even if you've moved. But it's not looking good, and as a result I am kind of forced to give Born Soldiers, and I never thought I'd say this, a 4 out of 10. I know that's a really low score. I know that's going to surprise a lot of people, and I know that auto wounding on 6s to hit is a very nice ability, but shackling it to being forced to stay still just cripples it. And honestly, unless we see some radical changes in how 40k games are going to be won and lost in the new edition, I suspect it's going to be the death knell of Born Soldiers. But now moving on to the datasheet and some happier news. The Cadian Shock Troopers are looking better than ever. They have essentially retained the exact same Guardsman stat line that they've always had, updated for 10th edition. But you've got your 6-inch movement, your toughness 3, your 5+ flak armor save, your 1 wound, your leadership 7+, and of course, being battle line and troops, they have that sweet, sweet objective control of 2. I don't know why it brings me so much comfort. Perhaps it's just that sense of the familiar, but it just feels so right that the Guardsmen have kept their classic stat line and it's not been messed with too much for the new edition. In terms of their ranged weapon and melee weapons, they have all the same ones that they had before, although some of them have changed. The bolt pistol, exactly the same. The Drumford autogun has actually taken a slight nerf. It used to give you 4 shots up close and personal and 2 shots at long range. Now it's just always 2 shots. The Flamer is, as you would expect, D6 shots, 12-inch range, strength 4, AP nothing, damage 1. It auto hits, and it now ignores cover, which is the case for all flame weapons in 10th edition, which is a nice bonus. However, that really swingy number of shots kind of kills it for me. It would have been nice for flame weapons to get D3+1 auto hits, but then also get blast. So the more enemy models they're shooting at, the more flames they can spread around. The humble lasgun and las pistol have remained completely unchanged, right down to the lasgun still being rapid fire 1. Melter guns have received an extra strength, but this just brings them into line with other melter guns in 10th, and the plasma gun has also been updated. Interestingly, the plasma gun now is pretty much always going to be supercharged because it gives you not only extra strength and damage, but you also get extra AP over the standard profile. But the really big winner and the surprise star of the infantry corps is the grenade launcher. Now, since the grenade launcher has been a thing in 40k, it's always been a bit of a crappy weapon. Even when people were taking them all the time in your autocannon grenade launcher infantry squads back in the glory days of 5th, 6th and 7th edition, people only typically took grenade launchers because they were the cheaper option. You used to have to spend like 15 or 20 points on like a melter gun, but it was only 5 points for a cheeky crack grenade launcher. But this cheaper price meant you got a crappier gun, naturally. But now the grenade launcher has been bulking. It's been hitting the gym and it is extremely swole. The frag blast has got an extra strength, which is fine. Going from strength 3 to strength 4 is all right. But it's the crack grenade launcher which has just gone, it's gone berserk. There's no other way of putting it. It's now strength 9. That is stronger than a plasma gun, and it's as strong as a melter gun. It's gone up to AP 2. This is a weapon that traditionally would be basically AP nothing or AP 1 in 8th and 9th edition. But nope, now it's AP 2, and it has maintained its D3 damage. That extra strength, that extra AP is just wild. Now, I totally understand and applaud this change by Games Workshop. The grenade launcher was always lackluster, and because GW made all weapon upgrades free for units and basically baked them into their base cost, there was pretty much no reason to ever take a grenade launcher. It was a worse weapon, and you didn't even save points by taking it. But now they've given it a really distinct niche. It has a range advantage over the melter gun, but the melter gun will do more damage and has better AP. It has a strength advantage over the plasma gun, but the plasma gun will benefit from first rank fire, second rank fire, and therefore has not only the potential of better AP, but also a higher volume of fire and reliable damage at that supercharge of flat 2. The grenade launcher still has to roll that D3. But now the grenade launcher brings its own advantages to the table, and it's certainly an equally valid option. It has the range that allows it to properly complement the plasma gun, something the melter gun sometimes struggled with. It's got the strength that allows it to threaten light vehicles. In fact, it has a better strength than that plasma gun. It's got enough AP where it's normally going to bump into an invulnerable save before it really matters. It's not AP 3 or AP 4, and it still manages to retain a decent average damage of 2, which once again makes it pair pretty well with the plasma gun. In fact, going forward, I think that the happy marriage of melter and plasma gun might actually be under threat, and I can see Mrs. Plasma Gun running away with the toy boy of Mr. Grenade Launcher. But it's not just the weapons of the Cadians that have changed. The abilities have also evolved. For example, Shock Troops now no longer gives you exploding hits with las guns, but instead allows you to have sticky objectives. Essentially, if you move a unit of Cadian Shock Troops onto a prime objective, even if that unit then dies or moves off it, you still get to retain control of that objective until your opponent waddles over and takes it off you in person. This ability is a big advantage for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it allows you to free up infantry from holding backfield objectives and push them forward, giving you greater offensive momentum. On top of that, against certain armies that like to shoot you off objectives, that's not going to really be an option anymore. That tile player has got to physically jetpack over to your home field objective if they want to take it off you, and doing that is going to put them at significant risk. Interestingly, Voxcasters have had a complete rework. They used to allow your officers to do long-range orders, speaking from one radio to another, but now they interact with command points. If you use a stratagem on a unit that has a Voxcaster, then if there's an officer nearby on a 4+, you gain 1 command point. Now, before we all say the sky is falling and we all say that this is stupid, radio shouldn't work like that, remember that we haven't seen how the Master Voxcaster for your command squads worked. I know that a lot of people prefer the longer range order ability that Voxcasters apply, and I still think that is going to be in the game. I think that your regular Voxcaster is going to give you this CP farming ability, and the Master Vox in the command squad is going to be where the long range order rules reside. But the really big news with Cadian Shock Troops and all of our other infantry units as well has nothing to do with their abilities or war gear. It's to do with the unit composition, because you can now take 20-man infantry squads. That's right, Blob Guard is back, baby! Yes! Oh, it feels so right. It's been so just wrong running around with 8th and 9th edition with our little 10-man squads. Guard up meant to be multiple small units. Leave that to the Space Marines. We are meant to have waves of infantry. Over the top, men! Send in the next wave! We are going in with the first wave! All that kind of good stuff. And it's just so good that they're giving us some semblance of our old platoons back, and we finally get to start scratching that proper infantry horde itch once again. What I really like about this change is you're not just adding an extra 10 riflemen into a squad, you are taking essentially 2 10-man Cadian Shock Troopers and mashing them together, making a combined platoon. This means that you benefit from having 2 sergeants, that means 2 drum-fed autoguns. You also benefit from having 2 Voxcasters. There's currently some debate on whether you can double CP farm if you've got 2 Voxcasters in a unit. It also means you have access to up to 4 special weapons in a single squad. although you can never take the same weapon more than twice in a large unit. That does mean, though, you can run around with 2 melter guns and 2 plasma guns, or what I think is going to become the go-to composition for these bigger squads, 2 grenade launchers, 2 plasma guns, 2 Voxcasters, and 2 drum-fed autoguns. I think the reason that Games Workshop is allowing us to take these bigger squads, not only just with our shock troops, but also our jungle fighters, Deathcore Krieg, and classic infantry squads, is because of the new, well, it's not force organization chart, but the way you build your armies. There is no longer troops, elite slots, or anything like that. There is just battle line and not battle line. And I think they realize that if they limit battle line units to just being taken 6 times at each army, guard players are going to get kind of annoyed if they had to start running 6 squads of Cadians and then also start adding in some weird like token infantry squads or Deathcore Krieg just to make up the numbers. This allows you to run 100 infantry, all of the regiment that you prefer, without starting to have to combine all the different regiments until you get into those really big numbers, 120, 200 guardsmen. For me, I am absolutely buzzing about this change. It's going to make building pure infantry guard armies so much more straightforward and so much simpler. We were having to put all these different units together, like, oh, I need 3 engineers, 3 scions, 3 Kazakin, 9 infantry squads. Where else can I start scrabbling around for little 10-man units? It was just annoying and a chore. Now I can go into a game and be like, look, I've got 12 20-man squads. 6 of them are Cadians, 6 of them are regular infantry. Job done. 2 data sheets and a bunch of officers. That's all I need to remember. But we're not done yet. There's still some more good news, because what's even cooler is that Games Workshop has confirmed on the Cadian datasheet that you can attach command squads, full-blown command squads, to your units of infantry. The datasheet says this unit can have up to 2 leader units attached to it, provided no more than one of those is a command squad. If it does, and this bodyguard unit is destroyed, the leader units attached to it become separate units with their original starting strengths. This means that you could have a unit of infantry, 20-man strong, then you add a command squad onto it, it becomes 25-man strong. We're starting to get some density there, and then you could also add in another leader, such as a commissar or a castellan. Either way, it sounds very promising, and it feels like you're going to be able to stack a lot of different buffs onto a single blob squad. But even if you're not a pure infantry commander, being able to take a blob squad or 2 in your army is going to be a very important tool to have. I can definitely see most guard armies including at least 1, probably 2, but maybe even 3 of these Cadian shock troop or infantry squad blobs, and attaching a command squad to each one, and maybe even also attaching a commissar. Of course, we haven't seen command squad or commissar rules yet, but assuming that the commissar is going to help with battle shock, it could mean you have a core of 60 plus infantry, which are all getting those orders off reliably, and that's only a good thing. There's also some crazy implications about being able to really maximize the firepower from these squads using platoon command squads. So for example, you could take a 20-man infantry squad, give it 2 grenade launchers and 2 autocannons, and then if you attach a platoon command squad rather than a Cadian one, you could give that platoon command squad an autocannon and another grenade launcher, and then the officer can have a bolt gun, the 2 sergeants in the squad can have bolt guns, and you've still got a master vox in there, or maybe even a medic. You just see how the medics will interact with big blob units. And overall, that's a very nice parcel of firepower. All right, we've taken a look at the infantry corps. Now let's go over to the complete opposite side of the spectrum and look at the armored might of the Imperial Guard. It is the Beam Blade. GW sure knows how to butter up its guard audience. Not only are they catering to the infantry commanders, but every tank commander worth his salt loves a good Baneblade. It's just one of the most classic guard tanks. On a small side note, I am kind of surprised that they didn't show off the Rogel Dawn, And I actually think that this was a calculated decision by Games Workshop, a little bit of a nod to the community, because they just know how iconic the Baneblade is. Now, the old Fortress of Arrogance has had a bit of a change to its profile. Its movement has been reduced to 9 inches instead of 10, but its toughness has gone up to 13. I think some of us were hoping for toughness 14, but toughness 13 is still very nice. It means that las cannons, which are now strength 12, are only going to wound you on 5s. This makes you very, very durable against that dedicated anti-tank. And it's only the biggest guns that are going to be able to wound you on 4s, and only the massive ones that are going to wound you on 3s. We have kept our 2+ save, which is good, but our wounds have been reduced down to 24. But I don't think this is quite a bigger problem as some people are making it out to be. The extra toughness will more than make up for the reduction in wounds. Would it have been nice to keep the extra wounds and have the better toughness? Of course. But I think this was a effort by GW to try and make the Baneblade a little bit balanced. I mean, if you want to console yourself, think about it this way. The Necron Monolith, an ancient weapon of intense doom with technology beyond humanity's ken, has less wounds than one big tanky boy. But for me, the big implication has nothing to do with the Baneblade, but actually the Imperial Knights. Traditionally, Knights have always had less wounds than Baneblades. When we had 26 wounds, they only had 22, 23, maybe 24, a push. When we had 30 wounds, they only had 24 to 26. I think a lot of people were expecting Knights to have 30, nay, even 40 wounds, but I don't see that happening. If I was a betting man and I had to take a guess at what a medium Knight profile was going to look like, a Paladin or Canis Rex, I think you're going to see toughness 12, maybe toughness 13, but I think toughness 12, and I would say 20 to 22 wounds. It'll be interesting to see what comes out in the wash when the Knights get their own faction focus. We then have got a leadership of 7+, pretty standard for the Guard, and an OC of 8, which seems to be the typical amount that GW are giving out to big super units. I mentioned the Monolith before, and I want to very briefly mention it again. It does amuse me that the Guard leadership now appears to be the same as the Necron leadership. That's just how good we are at holding the line. But moving swiftly on before the Necron Tomb World under my house opens up and I start getting turned into a flayed one, let's take a look at the ranged weapons. As with the shock troops, some things have gone up, some things have gone down, some things are spinning in circles, but overall, I feel it's pretty positive. The Baneblade cannon has got blast. This means that for every 5 models in an enemy unit, it gets +1 to hit. This is really good because the Baneblade cannon is very swingy, always has been. It fires 3d6 shots. Now on average that's going to give you 10, but we've all been there when you've rolled a couple of 2s and a 1 and your Baneblade cannon turns into a bit more of a fart gun from Despicable Me. The new blast rules reduce that risk. They give you a slight insurance policy against those terrible rolls. And if you're shooting this at a unit of 10 enemy infantry or a big unit of gaunts, you could see your attacks go up to 3d6 +2, 3, 4, or maybe even 6 against a proper horde. And 3d6 +6 gives you the potential of 24 shots. And these are pretty good shots as well. The cannon is now strength 12, receiving +3 strength over its other iterations, and also has got AP -2. That is a slight downgrade, but as we said before, Games Workshop was overall reducing AP in the game. The most important thing is it has kept that damage 3. Overall, I think the Baneblade cannon has improved. The extra strength means that it will be able to target all but the heaviest of vehicles and wound them on 3s. And even against some of the top end stuff, you're looking at 4s. And it's not until you start shooting it at other super heavies that it's going to begin to struggle, which is kind of fine. The Baneblade is not a dedicated Titan hunter. And I personally feel like the extra reliability against hordes more than makes up for the reduction in AP. And that flat damage 3 means that no matter what you shoot this at, if you get a wound through, you're going to tear a chunk out of it. Another big winner on the Baneblade is the coaxial autocannon. Obviously, autocannons are pretty prevalent in the Guard. Every infantry squad can take them. We've got Hydras, we've got Lehman Russes that are equipped with them. So it's good to get a little glimpse into what the wider autocannon picture may look like. And it's looking good. 48-inch range, attacks 2, blitz skill 4+, AP -1, all of that, same as. But then we get to flat damage 3 on the autocannon. That really begins to separate it from the heavy bolter. But the big news is it's now strength 9. So looking at this from a Baneblade's point of view, brilliant, we've got 2 extra more powerful shots, but my mind is racing. I'm looking at infantry squads and I'm thinking, we got strength 9 grenade launchers, we got strength 9 autocannons. Guys, it might have been 6 long years, but I think we've finally returned to the golden era of autocannon, grenade launcher, infantry squads being the meta and go-to choice. Yes! That news is sure to put a smile even on the most jaded and grizzled Guard player. But the good news does not stop there, because if you were a fan of the Demolisher Cannons, then they just got back on the menu. The Demolisher Cannons have got Blast, combined with the fact that they now do D6 plus 3 shots, making them very reliable in their damage output. And they've gone up to strength 14. And they've kept their AP of -3. They didn't get that reduced. And the only slight fly in the ointment is the D6 damage, making it a bit swingy. But that swingy damage on that end of the equation is much more preferred than the swingy amount of shots. I would rather have a random amount of damage than roll a dice for my main gun and for it to just roll a big fat 1 and basically take it out of the game for that turn. It's so frustrating. Having D6 plus 3 means you're getting an average of 7 Demolisher Cannon shots. That means even if your damage goes a little squiffy on 1 or 2 of those, you've got plenty more chances to pull the lever on the slot machine. And with Blast, even against 5 or 10-man squads, you're looking at D6 plus 4, D6 plus 5, and very quickly you can start seeing Demolisher Cannons getting a lot of extra shots from that Blast rule. So they are really big winners in my mind. Even the biggest enemy targets will be worried about the humble, good old Demolisher Cannon. And if you thought you were fully erect before, well, wait until you see the Heavy Stubber, everyone's favorite Browning heavy machine gun in space. Because the good old Stubber, the good old 50 cal, just got rapid fire 3. That means within 18 inches, you are getting 6 shots from a Heavy Stubber. Now, on a Baneblade, a bit like with the autocannon, that's nice to have. But the implication there is much more significant for other units. Think about the Rogel Dawn. That thing has 3 Heavy Stubbers on it. Think about the Stormlord. That's got a couple of Heavy Stubbers on it. Think about every Chimera in your army that you strap the 50 cal to. It just had its damage output doubled. And we've got one more little bit of good news with the ranged weapons. The Las Cannon has been brought into line with the other ones we've seen in 10th. So for all the people that were worried that the Ballistus Las Cannon and the Havoc Las Cannon were going to get special exemptions, nope. All Las Cannons in 10th seem to have the same range, which is great, same attacks, same strength of 12, big old AP of 3, and they finally all have slightly less casino damage with D6 plus 1. I am a really big fan of the new Las Cannon profile. It massively separates it from crack rockets, really gives it that distinct niche of being a proper heavy-hitting anti-tank weapon. Unfortunately, there are a couple of big flies in our soup. The Twin Heavy Bolter and the Twin Heavy Flamer. I was hoping that these would get the Land Raider treatment and they would count them as 2 separate weapons on the sponsons. But they've not done that. And as a result, I feel like the Baneblade sponsons have taken a massive hit. Twin Heavy Bolters now only fire 3 shots. And sure, they've got sustained hits. And sure, they've got Twin Link to make them re-roll the wounds. But it was the volume of fire that these 6 Heavy Bolters brought to the table that was vitally important to the old Baneblade. Because if your Baneblade cannon whiffed it, often the pure amount of Daka that 18 Heavy Bolter shots was bringing into the fight gave your Baneblade a certain level of reliability. 9 shots, even with all the special rules stacked onto them, really isn't going to pull the same amount of weight. And it only gets worse with the Twin Heavy Flamer. I mean, they do D6 shots. If you roll a big fat 1, you are not going to care that you get to reroll the wound with that 1 auto hit. Fortunately, I don't think the sponsons are vital anymore. I think the extra shots you're getting from Blast on the Baneblade cannon and the Martial cannon more than make up for it. Essentially, that's where your missing shots have gone. Another slight sadness though is the Baneblade is no longer the close combat beast it once was. In previous editions, getting run over by a Baneblade was actually a legitimate fear of the opponent, and you could send this thing into combat against almost anything and have a good chance of grinding it underneath your iron treads. But now the armor tracks only do 6 attacks rather than 9. Sure, it hits on a 4+ rather than a 5+ now, but you're only strength 8, there's no AP, and the only damage 1. It doesn't look like the armor tracks are quite as armored as they once were. In addition to its weapons, the Baneblade comes with a new ability, Rolling Fortress. This allows it to grant the benefit of cover to any units that are sheltering behind its armored bulk. What's really spicy about this rule is it doesn't just benefit infantry. Any model in your army can shelter behind the Rolling Fortress. Therefore, I have a really cool image in my mind of a Baneblade leading an armored charge at the head of a column of Leman Russes. Now, all of this sounds really positive, and it is very good, don't get me wrong, but there is one potentially massive Achilles heel, and that is the ballistic skill of the Baneblade. All of its weapons only hit on a 4+. Now, we've been here before. Guard vehicles can't hit on 4+. If they do, they just become unusably bad. And yes, we've got less dense terrain in the game in 10th edition. It doesn't matter. If we go back to 8th edition, I remember clearly Games Workshop doing everything they could to encourage guard players to take normal Leman Russes over tank commanders. Because every guard player was just taking 3 tank commanders in their list because the tank commanders had ballistic skill 3+, and the regular tanks only had 4+. At one point, I kid you not, there was a 100-point difference between a Leman Russ standard with Executioner cannon and a tank commander. And people still chose tank commanders because it didn't matter how cheap GW made the Leman Russ. It was always worth paying those extra points for the ballistic skill that actually meant you could do damage to your opponent. My hope is that Baneblades will be able to receive the take aim order from tank commanders, giving them +1 to hit and letting them hit on 3s. If they can't, it doesn't matter how tough they are, it doesn't matter how good Rolling Fortress is, you are not going to see these things on the table. Overall, I'm going to give the guard datasheets a very respectable 8 out of 10. For me, the Cadians are an easy 9 or even 10 out of 10. The fact that they can hold objectives well, all the improved weapons, and just blobbing them up is brilliant. It makes me very excited as an infantry commander. The Baneblades kind of bringing the score down a bit, but that's just with the uncertainty surrounding its ballistic skill. If we get confirmation that it can take aim, that unit, of course, points depending, will go from being like a 6 out of 10 all the way up to join the Cadians in a 9 out of 10. That's how much of a big difference hitting on 3s to hitting on 4s makes. But now we get to the last section of our faction focus, all the other little bits combined, the weapon profiles and the stratagems. And the first one we're going to start with is the controversial changes to the Leman Russ Battle Cannon. When GW previewed these rules, the internet got very salty very quickly, and I don't entirely blame them. If you've not played 10th edition and you look at this profile, you can easily be forgiven for thinking it's taken a massive nerf. But I want to settle your jimmies. I want to make you guys feel a bit better. The battle cannon has neither got better or worse. It has essentially just been completely reworked for the new edition. But at its core, it is still very much the jack of all trades, master of none weapon. It still very much is the cannon that you want when you don't know what you're going to be facing off against. It will never be a good top tier choice, but it will never be a terrible D tier choice either. Let me explain why I think this. Firstly, the battle cannon has maintained the most important improvement it got in 9th edition, which was D6 plus 3 attacks. That level of reliability is worth its weight in gold. The thing that kills weapons competitiveness more surely than anything else is random number of shots. Ballistic skill 4+ isn't great, but remember that technically right now the basic Russ has a ballistic skill of 4+ in the 9th edition book. It's just turret weapon is giving you +1 to hit. As long as the Leman Russ, like the Baneblade, can receive take aim, that ballistic skill won't be a problem. If anything, if you can receive take aim on your Leman Russ, it's going to overall improve its damage output because all of the sponsor weapons, which currently don't get any to hit modifiers, will actually also start hitting on that 3+ as well. But where things start changing is the strength, AP, and damage. Now, the strength of 10 is amazing. Really, really good. It means that you can engage any kind of infantry, light, medium, heavy, and you're going to wound it on a 2. That's actually an improvement in many cases over what the battle cannon currently experiences. Because if you shoot a battle cannon at something that's toughness 5, in 9th edition it only wounds it on 3s. But in 10th, it's going to wound it on 2s. So it has improved its anti-infantry wounding capabilities. But infinitely more important than wounding infantry, the strength 10 gives you really solid anti-vehicle capabilities. The most common toughness you're going to come across on enemy monsters and enemy vehicles is going to be 9. Most medium vehicles, anything that is right now toughness 7, things like your Eldar tanks, your skimmers, your rhinos, your chimeras, all of those things are going to still be wounded on 3s. And let's not forget that the Screamer Killer is going to be very popular at the beginning of 10th, and that only has a toughness of 9. Combine this strength with the flat damage of 3, and you have the potential to tear real chunks out of most targets that you point the battle cannon at. But the main controversy has to do with the AP, because it has been reduced to AP 1. This sole change is what has got the internet in such uproar and has caused loads of people to lambast the battle cannon and deride it as now a bottom tier choice. And I don't totally disagree with the internet. I think AP -1 is slightly too low. It's weird that the battle cannon has the same AP as a heavy bolter. It's weird it has the same AP as a autocannon. It's really wrong that it's got less AP than a crack grenade launcher. But if we turn our emotion chips off for a moment, Mr. Data, I think we can see the logic behind this change. And I think the point of it is to make other weapons feel a little bit more distinctive in their role. For example, the Vanquisher is now very clearly going to be an anti-tank beast. That's where its focus is going to be. And the battle cannon is going to stray much less into its territory, especially when you take into account it's got a reduced range as well of 48 inches. But also, the battle cannon is going to have probably better AP than the Punisher, which is almost inevitably going to go down to AP 0. But it's not going to be quite as good as anti-infantry's Punisher because the Punisher will have such a high volume of shots. The Executioner will be better at dealing with elite infantry. It'll have that strength 8 and it will have the higher AP. The Eradicator will be better at dealing with light infantry dug into cover. I think the Eradicator with AP -1 and ignores cover will actually find its niche finally. Demolisher, so on and so forth. All of these other weapons are going to be better in their niches, but they're going to really struggle to get out of them. I guarantee you that Executioner is only going to be strength 8. That almost completely locks out of being viable as anti-tank. You can't be wounding rhinos on 5s. It's just going to bounce off. Doesn't matter what AP you've got if you struggle to wound. And this is where your battle cannon shines. Because, like I said, it can engage those elite infantry. It's not going to be as efficient as an executioner, but it's still got the attacks and the strength and the damage to make sure that it can chip away a few terminators when they fail those saves. When you come across a horde, thanks to the new blast rule, it will be able to engage them and get enough volume of fire to put a semi-decent dent in that enemy blob of termagants. And when you come across enemy vehicles, sure, the Vanquisher is going to be a much better option for it. But the battle cannon can still be useful. And this is what this new profile represents. It truly is the jack of all trades, but the master of none. On the other hand, the Volcano Cannon is extremely specialized. And I honestly don't know how I feel about this weapon. It's got a great range. It's got fantastic strength, AP, and damage. The fact it's heavy means that even if you can't order it, if it stays still, it's going to be hitting on 3s, getting around a big problem that we've talked about already. But the real problem is the number of attacks. It only gets D3 plus 1. Sure, it's got blast, but you do not want to be shooting this thing at hordes. It should never be going near a squad of intercessors or termagants or guardsmen, alright? It doesn't matter if you're shooting this at a little 10-man squad of guardsmen. It's still only getting plus 2 attacks from that. And that D3 plus 1 means, on average, against its intended target, which is super heavies, it's only going to get 3 attacks. And if you're hitting on 3s, then you're only going to get 2 hits. Now, strength 24 means you're probably going to wound on 2s, at worst on 3, so you should still get both of those wounds through. And let's hope your target doesn't have an invulnerable save, because if it does and you only manage to get 1 wound through, sure, 12 damage is nice, but we've seen how many wounds that vehicles are rocking these days. And 12 damage might not be enough to one-shot an enemy knight. And really, if you're paying the premium points for a Shadow Sword, for a Volcano Cannon, you want to guarantee that when you point this thing at a Titan, that Titan goes bye-bye. I personally believe that the Volcano Cannon has been sacrificed on the altar of Games Workshop not wanting anything to be able to one-shot anything else at range. That's a bit of a shame, and it is going to make the Volcano Cannon less potent, and it's going to make it much riskier to use. Problem with having a weapon like this not being able to one-shot enemies is that you have to expose it to get the shot off. And if you flub it, or you just don't annihilate your target, there's a good chance that your target's going to come round and, destroy your Shadow Sword. It doesn't matter how tough you are, a whole knight cohort opening up on your Baneblade is going to see your Shadow Sword reduced to molten slag relatively quickly. The one thing that could save the Volcano Cannon is if you can order it. If you can combine heavy with take aim, and even if you've only got 3 shots, you would be hitting on 2s. Suddenly, this weapon makes a lot more sense and feels like it should do. You would be hitting on 2s, it means you're going to get all of your hits, it means you're likely to get all of your wounds, and then it's going to come down to that knight's invulnerable save. If it's a 5 up, it's going to make 1 of them, fail 2, and you're going to pop it in 1. That feels much more right for the Titan Killer. But moving away from tanks and weapon profiles, we've got one last little bit of the faction focus to analyze, and that is the new stratagem, reinforcements. Or to give it its proper grim dark name, send in the next wave. Basically, guys, when you lose a unit, you can spend 2 CP, and instead of that unit dying, it basically goes into your strategic reserves, and you can bring it back onto the table in your next command phase. Being able to send in wave after wave of guardsmen, being able to respawn more soldiers back into your army is just so guard. I could spend hours and hours just gushing over the stratagem. It feels so right to finally have it back at its full power in our army. The last time we had something like this was in 5th edition with our conscript blobs, and it was so much fun, and it wasn't as broken or overpowered as you thought, because at the end of the day, infantry is just infantry. Its job really is to die for the Emperor, And so being able to respawn 20 more infantry back onto an objective or use them to threaten a flank if you do that kind of stuff is great. But especially if you're facing off against a particularly tank heavy army, you're not going to do all that much damage with the extra guys. Mostly they're going to be there for just pushing more meat into the grind. It's more things your opponent to deal with. They're going to be doing some chip damage, going to be holding some objectives, and of course they are going to be achieving glory for him on Earth. What's really cool though is you seem to be able to use this on not just infantry, but things like your sentinels and also field ordnance batteries. Having a unit of scout sentinels come back on the board loaded up with hunter killer missiles could deliver a quite nice surprise punch. And it also means taking those more direct fire fobs, things with the heavy lance cannons or the managed rocket launchers, aren't such a silly idea anymore, because even if they die, it's okay, you can bring them back. What's really cool about the stratagem is it pairs kind of well with Cadence shock troops. You see, you could use this on a unit of shock troopers that just died, and if they've got a Voxcaster in there, then on a 4+, you could halve the cost of the stratagem. What starts getting kind of crazy is if you've got 2 Voxcasters in a big blob squad. The way the Voxcaster rule is worded is it's the bearer that is activating the ability. So if you've got 2 Voxcasters in one squad, that is 2 chances to respawn CP. So if you're lucky, you could lose a unit of Cadians, spend reinforcements on them, successfully regain a couple of command points, and essentially get that squad back for the low price of free. Now, on its own, I would be happy to give reinforcements a 10 out of 10, but we need to take into account the weapon previews as well. And so overall, I'm going to give this section of the faction focus a 7 out of 10. I think the battle cannon is not great, not terrible. I think it is being unfairly judged before people have actually tried it out in game. And I think once they do, they'll begin to appreciate its flexibility. The big miss for me though is the volcano cannon. Simply put, it has far too few shots, and giving it blast only improves it in an area that it's never going to be good at anyway. Therefore, when we add all of our different scores together, we get a total score of 26.5. In the grand scheme of things, this puts the Guard somewhere in between the Necrons and the Tyranids. And when it comes to judging whether a faction is really good or really bad, I tend to say if you get 30 points or more, you're looking very spicy indeed. And if you get less than 20, you're looking like you're going to be in trouble. And the Guard are looking like they're going to fit right in between those two categories. A decent mid-tier faction. We have our strengths, but we also have our weaknesses. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. If you have enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. And if you want to support the channel and see more content like this, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By becoming a supporter, you unlock a whole smorgasbord of perks, including access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community of almost 1,500 active people. It's always popping off in the MD Discord. We've got tactics, we've got army list channels, painting, hobbying, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. And of course, I want to say a massive thank you to all of my current Patreons and channel members. You guys are the lifeblood of this channel. Without you, I would not be able to do Mordian Glory. So a massive thank you to every single one of you guys. You truly are the heroes of the Imperium. But that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.